The night shift at Mirai General Hospital never truly went quiet. It just changed its noise. Machines replaced voices. Corridors traded footsteps for the soft squeak of rubber soles on polished tile. The overhead lights never dimmed. They just went cold. That particular shade of white that made everything look slightly too clean, slightly too still, like a photograph of a hospital rather than a real one. Bed 4 needs a pressure check. Pharmacy clearance on the sedative in 302. Someone cover the east corridor. Nurse Yoonju's running late again. Anna moved through it all like she'd been trained to be invisible. 3 days on the night shift. New badge, wrong pockets. She kept reaching for her pen on the wrong side. She hadn't learned the rhythms yet, hadn't found the shortcut through the linen corridor, and hadn't figured out which of the monitors had that 2-second lag before it registered a reading. But she noticed things. She always had. The tray in her hands was standard. 2 items. Paperwork clipped to the side. The syringe in the center, labeled, capped, correct dosage, printed in block font, caught the overhead light as she turned into the private wing. She almost kept walking. Almost. It was the viscosity. The way the liquid sat inside the barrel. Slightly too dense, slightly too slow when she tilted the tray. A color that wasn't quite wrong, just not entirely right either. A small clouding near the base of the barrel that shouldn't have been there if the vial had been stored at the right temperature. Protocol said, flag anything irregular. She kept walking, stopped, turned back, and looked again. Room 7, private suite. Patient. Hyunju, J, post-surgical recovery. Standard sedative administration. Cleared by senior staff. She picked up the tray. Her gloved hand tightened around it. She walked to the door. He was sitting upright in the bed when she entered. That was the first thing she noticed. Most post-surgical patients reclined. He sat like someone waiting for a meeting. Pale, controlled, the IV line feeding into his arm with the kind of quiet resignation that suggested he'd had worse in his life than needles. The monitors beeped steadily. Nurse Yoonju stood near the window, arms folded, watching Anna cross the room with the tray. About time, Yoonju said. Administer the dose. Anna set the tray down on the side table. She looked at the syringe. She looked at the man in the bed. His eyes were already on her, not impatient, not bored, just watching. The way people watch when they've been in rooms where small things mattered. The words came out before she decided to say them. Don't take the injection. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Something has been added. The room went very still. Yoonju's head turned sharply. The monitor beeped once, twice, 3 times. And the man in the bed, the man everyone in this hospital moved around carefully, spoke about in lowered tones, never quite named out loud, looked at Anna with eyes that sharpened like something had just come into focus. Repeat that, he said quietly. She swallowed, and did. She hadn't meant to say it at all. She'd been here 3 days, invisible, replaceable, the kind of new that people speak over in meetings. But Anna had spent her whole life noticing the things that no one else thought to look at. And what she saw in that syringe, what she understood from Yoonju's hands drawing the plunger without once checking for air bubbles, without verifying the dosage twice, without following a single step of standard protocol. It wasn't an accident, which meant someone in this hospital had put something in that syringe on purpose, which meant the man in that bed was in danger, which meant she had 2 choices, stay invisible or say something. She'd already said it. Now she had to survive it. The door clicked shut behind Yoonju, slowly, reluctantly, like the room itself was reluctant to close. Silence. Then Yoonju turned his gaze from the door back to Anna. He didn't speak right away. He studied her the way a man studies a thing he hasn't seen before and isn't certain yet whether it's dangerous or useful. You're new, he said finally. Yes? And yet you challenge senior staff. I follow protocol, she said. What I saw wasn't protocol. A long pause. The monitor continued its indifferent rhythm. Explain, he said, from the beginning. Anna took a breath. She had been on the night shift for exactly 72 hours. She had not yet learned the shortcut through the linen corridor. She had not yet figured out the lag on the monitor in room 4, but she had noticed the syringe. And now she was about to explain why, to the most dangerous patient in this hospital, while somewhere down the corridor, the person who'd prepared that injection was almost certainly still on shift. This is the part, she thought, where being invisible stops being safe. Anna had been trained to notice, not in the way they teach it in school, the official version, the textbook checklists and laminated procedure cards. That kind of noticing was performed. Institutional. It happened loudly, in front of supervisors, with documentation to follow. The noticing Anna had learned was quieter than that. It had come from a night 2 years ago, in a different hospital, on a different shift, a night she didn't let herself think about fully, only in pieces. A number transposed on a chart. A bag she hadn't looked at closely enough. A patient who was fine, then wasn't, then was again, but barely. Nothing official had been filed. No one named her. But she had named herself, privately, in the way that stayed with a person. You missed it. So now she looked. At everything. Longer than necessary, harder than required. At details no one expected a new hire to register, because new hires were supposed to move fast, keep their heads down, learn the hierarchy before they learned anything else. The hierarchy at Mirai General was not subtle. Senior nurses owned the floor after midnight. Consultant orders came down like weather. You didn't question them, you prepared for them. And Yoonju, who had worked this private wing for 11 years and moved through it like she'd built the walls herself, was the undisputed center of gravity on the night shift. She wasn't cruel. Anna had met cruel. This wasn't it. Yoonju was efficient in the way that had stopped requiring explanation. She gave instructions once. She didn't wait for questions. When new staff hesitated, her patience thinned visibly, like ice in warm water, still there, but thinner. And you knew better than to test the weight. Anna had been testing nothing. She'd been careful, quiet, useful in small ways. She'd learned quickly which tasks to volunteer for and which silences to fill, which was why, when Unju had handed her the tray for room 7, she'd taken it without a word. And then she'd looked at the syringe. The label was correct. The dosage matched the chart. Everything that was supposed to be right was right, on the surface, in the documentation, in the official record that anyone auditing this shift would look at. But Yoonju had drawn the plunger without tapping the barrel. No light flick of the finger to chase the air bubbles up. No second check of the dosage against the vial before capping. No pause, not even the half-second pause that became automatic after the first year. The small muscular memory of someone who had done this thousands of times and knew why each step existed. Small things. The kind of things only someone paying the wrong kind of attention would catch. Anna stood outside room 7 with the tray in her hands and thought about the night 2 years ago. About the number transposed on a chart. About how close fine and not fine actually were when you measured the distance honestly. She thought about Yoonju's hands, about the cloudiness in the barrel, about the way the liquid moved when she tilted the tray, thicker than it should have been, slower than sedative ran. She thought about staying quiet, keeping her head down, learning the hierarchy before she learned anything else. The door to room 7 was in front of her. She pushed it open. Some lines, she thought, you cross before you decide to. The room was different from the others. Anna had noticed it on her first shift, the way staff moved past room 7 with a particular kind of purposefulness, the universal body language of people who had somewhere else to be. No one lingered near the door. No one glanced through the small rectangular window the way they did with other patients, that unconscious check-in that nurses developed without realizing it. The security panel beside the door was new hardware. The chair outside, empty now, had been occupied every previous night by a man in plain clothes who wasn't on any staff roster Anna had seen. She hadn't asked about it. You learned quickly which questions to save. Hyunju hadn't moved since Yoonju left. He sat with the particular stillness of someone who had spent a long time learning how to make a room come to them rather than moving toward it. The IV line ran into his arm. The monitors held their steady rhythm. He looked from a distance like any other post-surgical patient in a private suite. Up close, he looked like nothing of the sort. Viscosity, he said. Not a question. He was repeating her word back to her, testing its weight. The fluid moves too slowly, Anna said. Sedative at standard concentration has a specific consistency. This is thicker. Not dramatically, not enough to see immediately, but if you know what you're looking for. And the color. Slightly off. There's a cloudiness near the base of the barrel that shouldn't be there if the vial was stored correctly and the compound is unaltered. She kept her voice level, clinical. The language of procedure was the only steady ground she had right now. It's subtle. Most people wouldn't catch it. But you did? I was looking closely. He studied her for a moment, not the way people studied someone they were sizing up for a threat, more the way a person read a document they hadn't expected to find relevant. How long have you been on this ward? 3 days. Something moved across his face, not quite amusement, not quite approval. Whatever it was, it didn't soften him. And the nurse who prepared it. Anju. She's been on this floor for 11 years. Anna paused. She didn't double-check the dosage, didn't clear the air bubbles, didn't follow standard protocol for a controlled sedative. Another pause. That's not carelessness. Not from someone with her experience. Hyunju's gaze moved, just briefly, to the syringe on the tray beside her, then back. Who signed the pharmacy release? Anna had checked. She had checked the way she checked everything, quietly and without announcing it, standing at the dispensary log for 30 extra seconds, while the night coordinator looked the other way. Minjae, she said. The release was logged under Minjae. The name landed in the room differently than her other words had. Everything before it had been a conversation. This was something else. Hyunju didn't move. He didn't speak immediately, but something behind his eyes shifted. A recalibration, small and precise. The way a compass needle moves when it finds north. Not fear. She would have recognized fear. She'd seen it in enough patients, worn in enough different ways. This was recognition. The slow, settling kind. The kind that meant he already knew the shape of what she'd just handed him. He just hadn't known how far it had reached. The monitor beeped. Neither of them looked at it. Minjae didn't make mistakes. That was the first thing Hyunju thought, and he let himself think it fully because it mattered, because the alternative required a different kind of thinking entirely, the kind that rearranged everything behind it, like pulling a thread from a seam. 12 years. Minjae had been with him for 12 years, since before the consolidation, since before the years that had required a certain careful distance from certain careful people. He had managed logistics that couldn't be written down and problems that couldn't be acknowledged. He was not brilliant in the way that announced itself. He was brilliant in the quieter, more useful way, the way that anticipated, that prepared, that made the space between a problem and its solution seem almost embarrassingly short. Hyunju had trusted very few people in his life, and Minjae was on that list. Near the top of it. Was. The word arrived before he'd decided to use it. It isn't a mistake, Anna said. She said it the way she'd said everything else, not loudly, not with the energy of someone trying to convince. She said it the way someone states a measurement, a fact with no investment in whether it was welcome. The compound alteration isn't accidental contamination, she continued. Accidental contamination presents differently, inconsistent distribution, trace particulates. This is uniform. Whatever was added was mixed deliberately. She glanced at the syringe once, then back to him. Someone who knew what they were doing added it to a vial that was then signed out through pharmacy under a name with access clearance. That's not a mistake. That's a process. Hyunju said nothing. He was thinking about a night 4 years ago when a rival's operation had collapsed with a speed that had surprised everyone except Minjae, who had simply nodded when given the news, as if he'd already filed it somewhere. Hyunju had found the efficiency admirable then. He was thinking about it differently now. Outside the room, something had changed. Anna registered it first, a shift in the corridor's ambient noise, the specific quality of movement that distinguished purposeful staff from staff who were circling. 2 sets of footsteps passed the door in the space of 4 minutes, the subtle percussion of a conversation ending quickly when it didn't need to. She didn't say anything yet, but she moved, only slightly, only enough, so that the tray was no longer between her and the door, Hyunju noticed. His eyes moved to the window, on him, then back. He had the focus of someone running calculations in a medium no one else could read. Not panicked, not slow, just processing with the efficient calm of a man who had navigated bad information before and understood that the next 30 seconds mattered more than the last 12 years. If what you're saying is accurate, he said, then the risk didn't come from outside. No, Anna said. The word sat between them. Internal betrayal had its own particular weight, different from an external threat, which arrived with geography, a direction to face, a perimeter to adjust. Betrayal from inside collapsed the perimeter entirely. It meant the map was wrong. It meant every decision made with confidence had been made on false ground. Hyunju looked at the syringe one final time. Then he looked at Anna, this new nurse, 3 days on shift, who had walked into his room and handed him something far more dangerous than the injection she'd stopped him from taking. I believe you, he said, not warmly, not with relief. The way a man accepts a difficult truth when refusing it would cost him more. The monitor flickered, just once. A half-second interruption in the waveform, the line dropping, then recovering, smooth and steady, as if nothing had happened. The kind of thing that registered in the peripheral vision and was immediately rationalized. Equipment aged, connections loosened. Private suites ran on the same aging infrastructure as the rest of the building, regardless of what the room rate suggested. Anna looked at it anyway. That shouldn't happen, she said. Hyunju followed her gaze to the screen. The connection. This unit is less than 18 months old. It's hardwired, not wireless. She was already moving toward the IV stand, not quickly, the way she moved when she wanted to look routine. A loose connection on hardware this new means something interfered with it, or someone. She paused, then added, more quietly, or it's telling us something else is wrong and we're not looking in the right place yet. She looked at the IV bag. Standard saline, clear, hanging correctly, drip rate normal. The line feeding cleanly into the cannula at his arm. She lifted the bag, turned it, found it near the top, a small puncture mark, almost invisible, the plastic sealed back around it with the particular smoothness of a needle withdrawn carefully rather than carelessly. Not a manufacturing defect. Those presented at the seam, in specific locations, with specific characteristics. This was a deliberate entry point, placed where the bag's upper curve would hide it from a standard hanging position check. She set it down, kept her face still. The bag's been tampered with, she said. Hyunju's jaw tightened, the smallest possible movement. How long? The bag was logged as changed at the start of this shift, 6 hours ago. She looked at the drip rate, did the calculation. At this rate of infusion, whatever was introduced has been entering your bloodstream for most of the night, slowly, incrementally. She kept her voice even. That's the design. Small dose contamination through IV is difficult to detect precisely because it's gradual. No acute reaction, no sudden change in vitals significant enough to trigger intervention. The body adjusts in real time while the compound accumulates. By the time symptoms present clearly, the concentration is already... She stopped. He didn't need her to finish the sentence. How long has it been in use, he said. Not the bag, the method. Anna looked at him. This isn't the first bag. The room went very still. This wasn't one act. That was the thing she was understanding now, assembling it the way she assembled anomalies, piece by piece, in sequence, each item unremarkable alone and damning in combination. The syringe was visible, detectable if you were looking. A single event delivery that could be questioned, intercepted, refused. The IV was different. The IV was patience. Days of slow accumulation, designed to look like gradual post-surgical decline, fatigue, mild confusion, organ stress that any attending physician would chart as expected recovery complications. No investigation, no suspicion. A clean, quiet outcome that required nothing more dramatic than a death certificate citing natural causes. Someone had built this carefully, from the inside, with access to pharmacy, to equipment, to shift schedules, and with enough knowledge of clinical process to make malice indistinguishable from medicine. The footsteps began outside the door. Not one set, not the purposeful single rhythm of a nurse on rounds. Multiple, measured. Moving without urgency, which was somehow worse than urgency, the particular cadence of people who believed they had time because they believed everything was already in motion. Anna and Hyunju looked at each other. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. "You shouldn't be moving," Anna said. "I shouldn't be here." Hyunju swung his legs off the bed with the careful deliberateness of someone overriding their body's objections through discipline rather than comfort. His color was poor, the hours of slow IV contamination doing what it had been designed to do, quietly and without announcement. But his hands were steady when they gripped the bed rail, and his eyes were clear. That mattered. That was something to work with. "The contamination will have affected your blood pressure," she said, moving to the IV line. "When you stand, you may feel... I know what I'll feel." He held his arm out. "Remove it." She worked quickly, the way she did everything now, without hesitation, without the half-second pause that belonged to a nurse following procedure in a room where procedure was the point. She released the cannula, applied pressure, taped the gauze with 3 economical movements. "Slowly," she said. "Stand slowly." He did. Held position for 2 seconds. She watched his face for the particular blankness that preceded a vasovagal drop, the moment the body's blood pressure failed the arithmetic of standing upright. It didn't come. He steadied, breathed once through his nose, and looked at her. "Where?" he said. Anna had spent her first 3 nights memorizing the floor. Not strategically. She hadn't known she'd need it strategically. She'd done it the way she did everything, out of the habit of paying attention to spaces, to exits, to the architecture of a place that most people move through without actually seeing. She knew where the blind spots were in the corridor cameras. She knew the supply route that ran behind the East Wing, a maintenance corridor designed for linen and equipment transit, accessible through a door that looked identical to a utility closet and was, consequently, ignored by anyone who didn't already know what it was. She knew which elevator the night security coordinator used for his 2 a.m. rounds and which one he didn't. "Supply corridor," she said, "behind the East Linen Room. It connects to the maintenance elevators on the far side of the building. They're not on the monitored network." Hyunju looked at her. "You've been here 3 days." "I pay attention to exits," she said. "It's a habit." She moved to the door before he could ask what kind of habit required that, and opened it by 2 inches, enough to see the corridor in both directions. Enough to read the light and the shadow and the specific quality of quiet that told her whether empty meant clear or empty meant waiting. Clear. For now. "Stay close," she said, "and stay behind me." The corridor was a different building entirely. The private wing's polished surfaces ended at the supply door. Behind it, exposed conduit, unfinished concrete, fluorescent strips mounted at intervals that left long stretches of functional dark between them. The air was cooler. The sounds of the hospital reached them, filtered and remote, like noise from another world. Anna moved with her hand trailing the left wall, counting junctions. Hyunju followed 2 steps behind, close enough that she could hear his breathing, controlled, deliberate, the effort of a man spending his reserves carefully. 30 meters, 20. The maintenance elevator was ahead on the right. Then the voices, low, calm, carrying clearly in the concrete corridor from somewhere behind them, not running, not searching, directing. "Check the east corridor. He won't use the main lifts." Anna knew that voice. She stopped moving. Min-jae. Anna pulled Hyunju into the side storage room in one motion, not a suggestion, a decision, her hand on his arm and her shoulder already against the door before either of them had processed the alternative. The door settled shut with a click that felt catastrophically loud and was, in reality, nothing. She didn't breathe. The footsteps passed the door, continued, slowed. Through the narrow gap where the door frame met the jamb, a sliver of corridor, barely the width of a finger, she could see him. Min-jae. She had only seen him once before, briefly, from a distance, a man in his mid-40s, unremarkable in the specific way of people who had cultivated unremarkability as a professional asset. medium height, composed posture, the kind of face that a witness afterward would struggle to describe with any precision. He was on a phone, not hurried, not scanning the corridor with the urgency of someone conducting a search. He moved the way people moved when they already knew the outcome of the thing they were managing, with the measured patience of administration, not pursuit. Beside her, Hyunju had gone completely still. She glanced at him. His eyes were fixed on the gap in the door. His expression was the most controlled thing she had seen in a room full of controlled things. Not blank, not collapsed, but sealed, the way a surface seals over deep water. Min-jae stopped walking. The room's been vacated. A pause. He listened. Then he's in the building. He won't get far. The contamination will have slowed his motor function by now. Another pause, shorter. It doesn't matter. We have time. Anna felt the words settle into her chest like cold. And what about the nurse? Min-jae considered this with the same equanimity he had applied to everything else. New hire. 3 days on shift. No one will look hard at what a new hire thought she saw. A brief pause. If she becomes a problem, she becomes a problem we solve the same way. Silence on the line. Then, they'll call it organ failure. Post-surgical complications, completely consistent with his admission profile. No investigation, no suspicion. He said it with the flat precision of someone reciting a conclusion they had already reached days ago. There's nothing to find because there's nothing that looks like anything other than medicine failing a difficult patient. He resumed walking. The footsteps faded. Anna became aware, incrementally, of several things. The concrete wall against her back, the sound of her own pulse, and the fact that Hyunju had not moved, had not spoken, had not reacted in any of the ways that people reacted when they heard their own death discussed in a corridor with the administrative detachment of a scheduling problem. She turned to look at him fully. His jaw was set. His eyes had moved from the door gap to the middle distance, that place people looked when they were not seeing the room they were standing in, but something further back, something being reassembled from the beginning. Not rage. She had expected rage, or something adjacent to it. What she saw instead was the particular expression of a man recalculating a map he had trusted, going back through 12 years of decisions made on accurate information and understanding, for the first time, that the information had a source he had never thought to verify. He looked at her. He planned this before I was admitted, he said. Not a question. The last piece of something sliding into place. Yes, she said. The storage room felt very small. Whatever this had been before, an anomaly, a suspicion, a risk she could still theoretically walk back from, it wasn't that anymore. There was no version of this night, Anna understood, that ended with her returning to the ward and finishing her shift. The stakes had just become the kind you didn't negotiate down. They moved. Not fast. Fast wasn't available to them. Hyunju's gait had changed in the last 10 minutes, the contamination doing its slow arithmetic on his blood pressure, on the precise coordination between intention and movement. He was managing it. She could see him managing it, the deliberate placement of each step, the hand that found the wall at intervals without leaning on it, the breathing held at a specific controlled depth. Anna set the pace. He matched it. The maintenance corridor branched left at the second junction. She knew this, had filed it away on her second night without knowing why, the way she filed everything. Left led toward the building's service infrastructure, the HVAC plant room, the generator housing, the freight access that the catering company used before 6 a.m., and which was, consequently, unmanned at 2:40 in the morning. She turned left. The first close moment came at the junction near the plant room. Voices, 2 of them, neither Min-jae, both purposeful, coming from the right-hand corridor. Anna put her hand back without looking, and Hyunju stopped, noiseless, as if he'd anticipated the signal. They held position in the shadow between 2 fluorescent strips, while the voices passed the junction and continued away from them. 14 seconds. She counted. Then she moved again. The second moment was worse. A door opened 40 meters ahead, a service entrance, a man stepping through backward, turning as he cleared the frame. Anna pulled them both against the wall and into the lean shadow cast by a cable conduit housing that was barely wide enough to justify the word shelter. She could see the man's profile. Now he had a radio. He was looking down the corridor in their direction with the patient. Methodical scan of someone who'd been told to check, rather than someone who expected to find anything. Hyunju's shoulder was against hers. She could feel his breathing, still controlled, but effortful now. The reserves spending faster than she'd have liked. Don't look up, she thought, at no one, at the general principle of the universe. Don't look up. The man's radio crackled. He answered it, turned, went back through the door. She exhaled through her nose. 30 meters, she said, barely voiced. Hyunju nodded once. The freight access door was metal, heavy, the kind that sealed against weather and opened with a push bar from the inside. Anna hit it with her forearm and it gave, cold air flooding in immediately, named the outside world arriving all at once after an hour of filtered, recirculated hospital atmosphere. She had forgotten what unmanaged air smelled like. They came through the door and she let it close behind them, controlled, not slammed. The click of the latch, the most important sound of the night. No alarm. The freight door wasn't alarmed. She had checked this 3 days ago, for no reason except that she checked things. The hospital rose behind them. Bright windows, lit corridors visible through glass, the clean, luminous architecture of a building that presented itself as a place of safety and order. From the outside, at 2:40 in the morning, it looked exactly like that. Anna understood, in a way she hadn't before tonight, how much work went into maintaining that appearance. Hyunju stopped walking, steadied himself, breathed. She stood beside him in the dark behind the building and let the cold air do what it did, clarify, settle, reduce everything to its actual dimensions. They were out. For now, they were out. The sirens were distant, not absent, somewhere on the other side of the building, the kind of organized response that followed a discovered empty room, a missing patient, a ward that had suddenly acquired questions it couldn't answer, but distant, moving in the wrong direction, buying them, for the moment, the specific luxury of stillness. They stood in the cold behind the hospital and didn't speak. Anna hadn't noticed inside how much noise the building made, the constant low frequency of a place that never fully stopped, the mechanical breathing of ventilation and refrigeration, and the thousand small systems that kept the lights on and the floors clean and the appearance of order intact. Out here it was simply quiet, cold and quiet and ordinary, the unremarkable back end of a building that had nothing to prove to the night. Hyunju leaned against the exterior wall, not collapsing, recovering. There was a difference, and she watched for it. His color was better in the cold air, or perhaps just different, harder to read. Why did you do it? He asked it the way he asked most things, without preamble, without softening. A direct question from a man who had spent the night recalibrating his understanding of who could be trusted, and was now applying that recalibration to her. Anna considered the question honestly, not because it was complicated, because she wanted to give it the answer it deserved, rather than the answer that was easiest to say. Because it was wrong, she said. The medication was wrong, and you were about to receive it, and I was the person standing there. Others were standing there. Others weren't looking. He was quiet for a moment. You risked your career, your safety. I followed protocol, she said. The real protocol, the one that exists before the hierarchy, before the shift schedule, before whatever arrangement kept everyone in that ward too careful to ask questions. She paused. Patients trust us with something they can't protect themselves. When that trust gets used against them and someone who knows better stays quiet, that's not caution, that's participation. The sirens shifted direction. Closer, then not. Hyunju reached into his coat. She didn't ask how it had arrived, assumed someone had brought it down before tonight, assumed there were arrangements she wasn't aware of, and would likely never fully understand. He produced a card. Plain. No visible markings from this distance. New identity, he said. Documentation, relocation, financial foundation. Is somewhere safe, somewhere they won't look. He held it out. You can't go back. Anna looked at the card. She knew he was right. She had known it since the storage room, since she heard Min-jae's voice discussing her the way you discussed a loose variable in a plan. There was no version of returning to that ward, finishing her shift, writing her notes, going home. That version of the night had closed behind them with the freight door. She took the card, not without grief. She was clear-eyed enough to name it, the life she'd built carefully after the mistake 2 years ago, the quiet professional rebuilding, the deliberate invisibility she'd constructed as both penance and protection. She was leaving it in the cold, behind a hospital that would, by morning, have a very clean explanation for everything that had happened tonight. And Hyunju straightened. He looked at her for a moment with an expression that had shed its calculation, something underneath it, briefly visible, that recognized a debt that money didn't quite cover. "You saved my life," he said. Anna shook her head. "I paid attention," she said. "That's all." He held her gaze for one more second. Then he turned and walked into the dark, and the night took him cleanly, and he was gone. Anna stood alone behind the hospital with a card in her hand, and the cold on her face, and the distant, receding sound of sirens looking for something they wouldn't find. She had spent years making herself invisible. She understood now, for the first time, what that had actually been worth.